His secretary winked as she spilled coffee on my blouse. Oops. He likes me messy, she giggled, eyeing my husband like she owned him. At the board meeting, I walked in wearing a power suit and dropped the mic. Literally. I just bought 51% of the company. She's no longer his secretary. I promoted her to janitor. Enjoy the mop. His secretary winked as she spilled coffee on my blouse. The memory burned hotter than the scalding liquid that had soaked through my cream silk top just hours earlier. I stood in my walk-in closet, staring at the stained garment I'd flung over the hamper, still unable to process what had happened at Crawford Industries today. A company that once bore my DNA in every brick, policy and handshake was now a place where I, Ruby Crawford Hamilton, was treated like an unwelcome outsider. Before I continue my story about reclaiming my family's legacy, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey of rediscovery and empowerment. If stories about standing your ground and fighting for what's rightfully yours resonate with you, consider subscribing. It's completely free and connects you with others who believe in preserving what matters most. Now let's dive in. I ran my fingers over the row of power suits I hadn't worn in 15 years, each with price tags still attached. Impulse purchases for a return to corporate life that never materialized. Beyond them hung the faded photograph of my father and me standing before the original Crawford Industries building, a converted warehouse with a hand-painted sign. Dad's arm wrapped protectively around my shoulders, his weathered face beaming with pride as he held up the keys to our future. "Remember what matters, Ruby girl," Matthew Crawford would say, his voice like worn leather. "It's not about the money in the bank. It's about building something that outlasts you." My father started Crawford Industries in our garage with nothing but a second-hand drill press and unwavering determination. By the time I graduated college, the company employed over 200 people. Most from our neighborhood, many related to each other, all treated like extensions of our family. Dad insisted I learn the business from the ground up. Summer vacations meant working in shipping, then accounting, then sales. After business school, I became the youngest operations manager in the company's history. The employees respected me not because I was the boss's daughter, but because I remembered their spouses' names and asked about their children's baseball games. Because I brought homemade cookies to meetings and stayed late helping the cleaning staff when deadlines loomed. Because I was my father's daughter in more than just name. Then along came Bentley Hamilton, charming, ambitious, with a sales pitch that could seduce even the most reluctant clients. He joined our sales team and immediately broke company records. Unlike the other newcomers, he took time to learn our history, to understand the Crawford philosophy of business with a handshake integrity. Or so I thought. "You're the heart of this place," Bentley told me on our third date as we walked through the empty factory floor after hours. "Your father built something special, but you're the one who makes it beat." I believed him. I fell for his vision of us running the company together someday, continuing Dad's legacy while modernizing responsibly. Marriage came quickly, followed by our first child barely a year later. When little Matthew was born, my priorities shifted overnight. The company that had been my second home suddenly felt less urgent compared to the miracle in my arms. Bentley suggested I take a temporary leave. "Just until he's in school," he assured me, cradling our son. "The company will always be there. These moments won't." Dad raised concerns during our Sunday dinners. "Business is about consistency, Ruby," he warned, passing the potatoes. "Step away too long, people forget whose name is on the building." But I was sleep-deprived and in love with motherhood. Our daughter Eliza arrived 18 months later, and my temporary absence stretched indefinitely. Then came the stroke. One minute Dad was delivering a toast at the company picnic. The next he was unconscious on the grass, half his body suddenly betraying him. The following weeks blurred into a nightmare of hospital corridors and devastating prognosis. With Dad incapacitated and me overwhelmed with 2 toddlers in his medical care, the board unanimously appointed Bentley as acting CEO. "Just until things stabilize," the board chairman assured me, patting my hand like I was a child. "Bentley understands Crawford values." The first changes seemed innocuous. The company newsletter went digital to save trees. The annual Christmas bonuses became performance-based rather than equal across departments. The company picnic moved from the local park to an upscale country club. Each time I questioned a change, Bentley had a plausible explanation wrapped in business terminology that made my domestic concerns sound naive. "Margins are tightening, Ruby. We can maintain your father's values without clinging to outdated practices. 5 years after Dad's stroke, I visited headquarters to drop off homemade cookies for Admin Appreciation Day, a tradition Dad started decades ago. The receptionist, a young woman I'd never met, asked for my ID. When I mentioned I was Matthew Crawford's daughter, she stared blankly. I'm not familiar with that name. Is he in accounting? That night I confronted Bentley over dinner. Nobody there even knows who Dad is anymore. Bentley reached for his wine glass, not meeting my eyes. We've had significant turnover, Ruby. You can't expect new people to know ancient history. Ancient history? Dad founded that company. His name is literally on the building. It's just business evolution. Nothing personal. But it was personal. Each subsequent visit revealed another piece of my father erased. The mission statement he crafted, quality, integrity, family, disappeared from letterhead. The wall of employee service awards was replaced with sleek digital displays showing stock prices. The comfortable break room where Dad hosted monthly birthday celebrations became a sterile collaboration space, with uncomfortable modern furniture. Last Christmas, the company party excluded retired employees for the first time in Crawford history. When Mrs. Abernathy, Dad's first bookkeeper, called me in tears after receiving no invitation, something inside me cracked. I drove to the assisted living facility where Dad now resided, his once powerful frame diminished but his eyes still sharp. He's changing everything, I whispered, holding his good hand. Crawford Industries doesn't feel like ours anymore. Dad squeezed my fingers with surprising strength. With labored speech, he managed 4 clear words that haunted me for months. Then take it back. I dismissed the idea as impossible. I'd been away too long. The board now consisted of Bentley's hand-picked allies. My corporate wardrobe gathered dust while I chauffeured teenagers and coordinated Dad's medical care. How could I possibly reclaim a company that had moved on without me? Then came today's coffee incident. Savannah Miller's calculated cruelty and my husband's dismissive response weren't just workplace drama. They were symptoms of how far Crawford Industries had fallen from my father's vision. As I fingered the stained blouse, Dad's words echoed again, then take it back. For the first time in 15 years I was ready to try. I woke the next morning with newfound determination, Dad's words still resonating, take it back. My first step would be reconnecting with the company. Not as Bentley's wife dropping by with homemade treats, but as a Crawford asserting her presence. I selected a simple cream silk blouse and charcoal pencil skirt, professional but not imposing, and drove downtown to the gleaming glass building that had replaced Dad's modest brick headquarters 5 years ago. The security guard at reception didn't recognize me. I'll need to see some ID, ma'am, he said, barely glancing up from his monitor. I presented my driver's license. Swallowing the bitter pill that once upon a time, every employee knew Matthew Crawford's daughter by sight. Mrs. Hamilton to see Mr. Hamilton, he announced into his phone after checking his visitor list. No, not on the schedule. Spouse visit. The word spouse carried the subtle weight of inconvenience. I was logged as a personal interruption, not a professional courtesy. The elevator doors opened to the executive floor. A space unrecognizable from my days as operations manager. Gone were the warm wood-paneled walls and family photos of employees' milestone celebrations. Everything was chrome, glass, and stark white, the air perfumed with something synthetic that reminded me of hotel lobbies. Even the lighting felt harsh, designed for alertness rather than comfort. Mrs. Hamilton. A young woman approached, moving with practiced efficiency in impossibly high heels. What a surprise. We weren't expecting you. Her smile revealed perfect teeth, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her badge identified her as Savannah Miller, Executive Assistant. She couldn't have been more than 26, with a sleek ponytail so tight it looked painful and a skirt so fitted it restricted her stride to tiny measured steps. Is Bentley available? I thought I might take him to lunch, I said, matching her polite tone while noting how she'd positioned herself between me and the hallway leading to his office. Savannah's expression flickered, almost imperceptibly, before regaining its professional veneer. He's in a conference call that should wrap up shortly. Why don't I get you settled in the waiting area? Can I bring you some coffee? The waiting area turned out to be a sterile arrangement of uncomfortable modernist chairs near the elevator. Not Bentley's office as protocol would dictate for the wife of the CEO. I'd been relegated to visitor status. Common. Sonal. Black, please, I answered, watching her retreat toward the break room. Through the glass walls, I observed her typing rapidly on her phone before preparing the coffee, her lips curled in what appeared to be amusement. Savannah returned with 2 coffee cups, handing me one while keeping the other, adorned with a perfect imprint of bright red lipstick, for herself. Mr. Hamilton should be free soon, she said, remaining standing though there were empty chairs. He's been under such pressure lately with the Anderson merger. I've been staying late most nights to help him manage the workload. The emphasis on nights wasn't subtle. Nor was the proprietary way she adjusted her blouse, drawing attention to the monogrammed cufflinks securing her sleeve, cufflinks I'd given Bentley for our 10th anniversary. I was contemplating this revelation when Bentley's laugh echoed down the hallway, that specific laugh he reserved for important clients and board members. Savannah's demeanor transformed instantly, her posture straightened, eyes brightening with anticipation. Bentley rounded the corner, engaged in animated conversation with 2 men in expensive suits. He faltered momentarily upon seeing me but recovered quickly. Ruby. What a surprise. He kissed my cheek perfunctorily before making introductions. Gentlemen, my wife. Ruby, these are the Anderson brothers, our newest acquisition partners. Savannah stepped forward with practiced grace. Your coffee, Mr. Hamilton, prepared just how you like it. She handed him the lipstick-marked cup with a smile that contained an entire private conversation. As Bentley accepted it, their fingers brushed in a touch that lingered 2 seconds too long. His wedding ring caught the fluorescent light, the same ring I'd placed on his finger 17 years ago when we'd promised forever. What happened next occurred in slow motion. Savannah pivoted toward me, coffee cup still tilted slightly forward. Her heel caught on nothing at all, a practice stumble, and suddenly hot liquid cascaded down my silk blouse, the brown stain spreading across the cream fabric like a Rorschach test of betrayal. Oh! Savannah gasped, eyes wide with manufactured shock. I'm so clumsy. Let me help you clean up. She dabbed ineffectually at my blouse with a tissue, managing only to spread the stain further. Then came the whispered words that confirmed everything wasn't just in my imagination. Oops. He likes me messy, she giggled, voice low enough that only I could hear. Her eyes flicked toward Bentley with unmistakable intimacy before adding, You should see his office after our late nights. I stepped back, coffee dripping onto my skirt as Bentley approached with a look of mild concern that never reached his eyes. Accidents happen, he said dismissively. Savannah, show my wife to the restroom, would you? Gentlemen, shall we continue in the conference room? Just like that, I was dismissed. An inconvenience to be managed while important business continued. In the bathroom, I blotted at my ruined blouse with paper towels, my hands trembling with a mixture of humiliation and rage. The door swung open, revealing an older woman in a Crawford Industries uniform. She froze upon seeing me. Miss Ruby? Is that really you? Through my tears, I recognized Margaret Peters, Dad's former executive assistant who had apparently been demoted to maintenance staff. Her once proud posture now stooped with age and perhaps resignation. Margaret? What happened to you? I asked, abandoning my blouse to grasp her weathered hands. Budget restructuring, she replied with a sad smile. Most of us old-timers got shifted around after Mr. Bentley's new team came in. Those who didn't take early retirement packages were reassigned. At least I still have health insurance for my Arthur's medications. For the next 15 minutes, Margaret filled in the gaps of my knowledge. How Bentley had systematically pushed out Dad's loyal employees, how Savannah had appeared 6 months ago and immediately established herself as untouchable, how rumors swirled about company funds being diverted to shell corporations with curious ownership structures. Your father would be heartbroken to see what's happening, Margaret whispered. The Crawford name means nothing here anymore except on letterhead. I straightened my shoulders, decision crystallizing. Do you still have access to company records, Margaret? Cleaning staff goes everywhere, sees everything, she replied with a knowing look. Nobody notices the woman with the vacuum. I need information, I said quietly. Financial records, board minutes, shareholder distributions from the past 5 years. Margaret nodded slowly. About time someone looked beneath the surface. Meet me tomorrow at Carlson's Diner, 7 a.m. Nobody from here eats at places without cloth napkins. As I drove home in my coffee-stained clothes, the humiliation transformed into cold, calculated resolve. This wasn't just about Bentley's betrayal or Savannah's cruelty. This was about my father's legacy being dismantled piece by piece. The company built on integrity was rotting from within. I made 2 stops on the way home. First to my father's attorney who had retired 3 years ago, then to the bank where Dad had established my trust fund, untouched since my wedding day. By nightfall I had assembled the beginnings of a plan. Crawford Industries might have forgotten who built it, but I was about to deliver one hell of a reminder. Carlson's Diner hadn't changed in 20 years. Same cracked vinyl booths, same coffee-stained menus, same smell of bacon grease and maple syrup. Dad used to bring me here for Saturday breakfasts before heading to the office. The familiarity was comforting as I slid into a corner booth at 6:45 a.m., ordered black coffee and waited for Margaret. She arrived precisely at 7, carrying a weathered leather briefcase I recognized as my father's old document carrier. Margaret had aged visibly in the years since Dad's stroke. Her once auburn hair now completely silver, deep lines etched around her eyes, but her posture remained military straight as she slid into the booth across from me. "You're taking a risk meeting me," I said quietly after the waitress poured her coffee. Margaret's laugh was dry as autumn leaves. "What are they going to do, demote me to cleaning toilets?" "Oh wait." He tapped the briefcase. "I've been gathering things for years. Didn't know why, just felt wrong throwing away the real Crawford history. Guess I was waiting for you to come back." She unlatched the case and passed me a thin folder. "Start with these board minutes from the last 5 years. Notice who's missing from attendance." I flipped through the documents, confusion mounting. "There are no Crawford representatives here except Bentley." "Your father's stroke was convenient for some people," Margaret said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "The board was gradually reconstructed. Your family's controlling interest became diluted through some complicated stock maneuvers. I'm no financial expert, but even I could see something wasn't right. But the company is still called Crawford Industries. We still own the majority shares. On paper, maybe." Margaret slid another folder toward me. "These are property acquisitions made by shell companies that, if you look closely enough, all trace back to a holding company called BHS Enterprises. These Bentley Hamilton Securities. I guessed." Margaret nodded. "With an interesting silent partner, S. Miller Investments." "Savannah Miller," I whispered, the coffee incident suddenly taking on new dimensions. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated business partnership. "There's someone else you need to talk to," Margaret said, checking her watch. "George Whitman." The name hit me like a physical blow. George had been Dad's best friend, our chief financial officer for 30 years and my honorary uncle. He'd taught me to drive, attended my college graduation and given a heartfelt toast at my wedding. Then he'd suddenly retired 3 years after Dad's stroke. "I thought he moved to Florida," I said. Margaret shook her head. "Live's 20 minutes from here." Bentley spread rumors about early dementia to discredit him when George questioned some financial decisions. Last I heard, he was consulting for small businesses and avoiding anything with the Crawford name. She wrote his address on a napkin. "He's been waiting for this day longer than I have." I found George's modest ranch-style home in a quiet subdivision across town. The man who answered the door bore little resemblance to the robust financial wizard who'd once commanded our boardroom. His shoulders had collapsed inward, his former wrestler's physique diminished. But his eyes, those shrewd blue eyes that could spot a discrepancy in a financial statement from across the room, lit up with recognition. "Ruby Crawford," he breathed, enfolding me in a bear hug that smelled of pipe tobacco and aftershave. "My God, you're the spitting image of Matthew in his prime." George's living room walls were covered with photos of his life at Crawford Industries. Company picnics, retirement parties, the groundbreaking for our second factory. A visual timeline of everything that had been erased from the current headquarters. "I should have contacted you years ago," I admitted as he poured us tea. "After they pushed you out." "They didn't push me out," George interrupted sharply. "They framed me. Doctored financial reports with my signature, backdated transactions, created paper trails suggesting I'd misappropriated funds. When I started investigating, Bentley offered a choice: resign quietly with my pension or face criminal charges." My hands trembled around my teacup. "And you just left? Without fighting?" George's expression darkened. I fought in my way. Been documenting everything for years, building a case. But without board support or controlling shares, I was shouting into the void. He studied my face. Something's changed. You're here for a reason. I told him about the coffee incident, Margaret's documents, the obvious affair, and the troubling financial connections between Bentley and Savannah. George listened intently, then disappeared into his study, returning with a laptop and external drive. Operation Reclamation, he said with the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. Every questionable transaction, every violated bylaw, every instance of corporate malfeasance I could document. Plus something they don't know I kept. My original employment contract, signed by your father, granting me stock options that were never properly cancelled. For the next 3 hours, George walked me through his meticulous documentation. The pattern was clear. Bentley had been systematically weakening Crawford family control while enriching himself and his allies. The company's foundational values hadn't just been abandoned. They'd been deliberately targeted for destruction. Why would he dismantle everything that made the company successful? I asked. Because principled companies are harder to strip mine, George replied grimly. Every decision your father made prioritized long-term stability over short-term profit. Bentley's playing a different game. Pump up value, extract resources, move on. Before I left, George made a call to Harold Jenkins, our former production manager who now worked for a competitor. By dinner time, I had meetings scheduled with 6 former Crawford executives who'd been pushed out under suspicious circumstances. A network was forming. People who remembered what Crawford Industries stood for and wanted justice. That night, after Bentley texted he was working late, the lie now transparent, I drove to the storage facility where Dad kept personal records. I hadn't visited in years, paying the fees automatically through his trust. The security guard recognized me immediately. He'd worked briefly in our mailroom decades ago. Inside the climate-controlled unit lay the physical history of Crawford Industries. Original blueprints, handwritten ledgers, photographs, and most importantly, filing cabinets containing incorporation documents and shareholder agreements drafted long before digital records could be manipulated. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, I discovered something Bentley had clearly missed. A provision in the original company charter giving the founder or direct descendants special voting rights under specific circumstances of suspected misconduct. The clause had never been invoked, but it existed in black and white, signed and notarized 40 years ago. I sat on the concrete floor surrounded by my father's legacy, a plan crystallizing with each document I examined. The company's quarterly board meeting was scheduled for next Thursday, just 9 days away. With George's evidence, Margaret's inside information and the network of former employees, I had a foundation. With Dad's legal provisions I had leverage. Dawn was breaking as I finally closed the storage unit. Exhausted but clear-headed, I drove to the assisted living facility where Dad resided. Though his stroke had limited his mobility and speech, his mind remained sharp. I needed his blessing for what would come next. He was awake, watching sunrise paint the sky outside his window. When I entered, his good eye focused intently on my face, recognizing something had fundamentally changed. I found it, Dad, I said, taking his hand. The way back. The way to save Crawford Industries. I outlined my discoveries and plans in simple terms, watching his expression closely. When I finished, Dad squeezed my hand with surprising strength. With effort he formed 4 clear words. You are my legacy. In that moment, standing in the golden morning light with my father's approval warming me, I made my final decision. Crawford Industries wouldn't just be reclaimed, it would be reborn. The clock that had stopped 15 years ago when I stepped away began ticking again, counting down to a reckoning no one at that gleaming glass headquarters could possibly anticipate. 9 days. The countdown to the quarterly board meeting ticked relentlessly in my mind as I drove home from Dad's facility. 9 days to orchestrate a corporate coup while maintaining the facade of an oblivious housewife. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years I'd played the role Bentley expected, and now that very underestimation would be his downfall. My first call was to Erica Patterson, Dad's longtime attorney who had retired shortly after Bentley took over. Now running a small practice specializing in corporate governance, she listened without interruption as I outlined what I'd discovered. The founder's provision is legitimate, she confirmed after reviewing the documents I'd photographed. It's unusual but not unprecedented. A safeguard against hostile takeovers that was common in family businesses of that era. The question isn't legality but leverage. How many shares can you access? My trust fund held 15% of Crawford Industries stock. Significant but not controlling. George's improperly cancelled options represented another 3%. Margaret had quietly held on to 2% gifted by Dad years ago. The retired executives in my fledgling network controlled small percentages that collectively might reach 7%. We need 34% to invoke the founder's provision, Erica explained. And we'll need ironclad evidence of misconduct to justify using it. I spent that afternoon in Erica's office, mapping out potential allies and obstacles. By evening we'd identified a crucial target. Douglas Fletcher, the oldest-serving board member who had been Dad's banker for decades before Bentley relegated him to a symbolic role. Fletcher controls 8% through his family investment firm, Erica noted. And from what I hear, he's been increasingly uncomfortable with Bentley's direction. Our strategy took shape. I would approach Fletcher with George's evidence, appeal to his history with Dad and secure his shares for the vote. Meanwhile, Erica would quietly contact other minority shareholders who'd been sidelined in recent years. At home I maintained perfect normalcy. When Bentley returned that night, I greeted him with a gentle kiss and no mention of the coffee incident. During dinner, I listened attentively to his complaints about incompetent middle management, while silently identifying which loyal employees I would reinstate after the takeover. "You seem different," Bentley remarked, studying me over his wine glass. "More present." I smiled, channeling 15 years of acting experience as the supportive wife. "Just trying to take more interest in your work. I've been thinking about Dad's legacy lately." Something flickered in Bentley's eyes. Caution perhaps. "Matthew's condition hasn't changed, has it?" "No, just reflective, I guess. The kids are practically grown. Maybe it's time I found something meaningful to do with my days." Bentley's relief was palpable. "You should take a class. Join a charity board. Something fulfilling but flexible." His tone made clear what he meant. Something that wouldn't interfere with his life or career. The next morning, I met Douglas Fletcher for coffee at an out-of-the-way cafe where Crawford employees wouldn't venture. At 72, Fletcher remained sharp, his handshake firm as he assessed me with banker's calculated eyes. "You look like Matthew in his prime," he said, the exact words George had used. Same determination around the mouth. I presented the evidence methodically: the shell companies, the diverted funds, the systematic dismantling of Crawford values. Fletcher listened without comment, occasionally making notes in precise handwriting. When I finished, he closed his leather portfolio slowly. "I've known something was wrong for years. Couldn't prove it, and my protests were consistently outvoted." He fixed me with a penetrating stare. "What exactly do you want from me, Ruby?" "Your proxy at the board meeting next Thursday. And your word that you'll keep this conversation confidential until then." Fletcher considered for a long moment. "Matthew saved my bank during the savings and loan crisis when everyone advised him to pull his accounts. Said he valued relationship over interest rates." He nodded once, decisively. "You have my proxy." Day by day our coalition grew. A retired vice president pledged his shares. So did a former plant manager. 3 regional sales directors who'd been pushed out during restructuring eagerly joined our cause. By day 5 we controlled 29%. Tantalizingly close to the threshold needed. Meanwhile, I lived a double life with increasing difficulty. While preparing family dinners, I took coded calls from Erica about stock acquisitions. While doing laundry, I studied corporate bylaws. While Bentley slept, I emailed strategic documents to our growing team of allies. The charade nearly collapsed on day 6. I was reviewing confidential financial records in my home office when Bentley returned unexpectedly from work. I barely had time to switch screens before he appeared in the doorway. "What are you working on so intently?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Planning Dad's 75th birthday," I lied smoothly. "The assisted living facility is helping coordinate something special." Bentley frowned. "That's months away. You know me, always the overplanner." I closed the laptop casually. "Bad day at work?" Fletcher's being difficult about the Anderson acquisition. Suddenly questioning every detail like he's relevant again. Bentley poured himself a scotch from the small bar in the corner. And someone's been accessing old personnel files. IT flagged it this morning. My pulse quickened. Margaret had been using her cleaning staff credentials to gather information. Probably just a system glitch. Probably. Bentley studied me over his glass. You visited your father yesterday? I visit him every week. You know that. Savannah thought she saw your car near headquarters afterward. The question hung unasked between us. I manufactured a laugh. Downtown after visiting hours? I was at Sarah's book club. Call her if you don't believe me. Thank God I'd actually asked my friend to cover for me if needed. The moment passed, but I knew our window was narrowing. Someone had noticed the unusual activities. Margaret texted a warning the next morning. Security protocols had been heightened, badges were being checked more rigorously. On day 8, Erica called with triumphant news. We've got 32%. 2% short but gaining momentum. That same afternoon, Fletcher called with a problem. Hamilton knows something's happening. He's called an emergency executive session before the main board meeting, trying to push through the Anderson merger before anything can interfere. We needed one more ally. Someone with significant shares and courage to stand against Bentley. Someone he wouldn't suspect. The answer came from an unexpected source. Bentley's younger brother Timothy, George suggested during our final strategy meeting. He inherited 5% from their grandmother but never takes an active role. He and Bentley haven't spoken in years, some dispute over family property. Would he help us? I asked. George's smile was wolfish. Bentley blocked his application to work at Crawford straight out of business school. Said nepotism would look bad, right before promoting his college roommate to vice president. The night before the board meeting, I made the pivotal call to Timothy Hamilton from a burner phone. He listened silently to my proposition, asked 3 incisive questions that confirmed his business acumen, then simply said, "Email me where to sign." With Timothy's shares we controlled 37%, enough to invoke the founder's provision and force a comprehensive vote on leadership. The final evening I stood before my closet contemplating the battle uniform for tomorrow's war. The power suits still bore price tags, preserved in plastic for a return to corporate life that had never materialized. Until now. I selected a charcoal gray suit with subtle Crawford blue pinstripes. Dad's favorite color, incorporated into every company logo until Bentley rebranded with sleek silver. I laid out crisp documents in my briefcase. Original papers from Dad's storage unit, George's meticulous evidence, partnership agreements, proxy authorizations. Then I added one final touch, Dad's old fountain pen, the one he'd used to sign the original incorporation papers 40 years ago. In the bathroom I studied my reflection as I applied subtle makeup and styled my hair into a professional updo. The woman in the mirror wasn't the comfortable housewife who'd spent 15 years on the sidelines. This was Ruby Crawford re-emerging, the heir apparent who'd once known every employee's birthday, the operations manager who could recite production numbers from memory, the daughter trained from childhood to lead. "Who are you talking to?" Bentley asked from the bedroom, hearing my whisper. "Just myself," I called back. "Finalizing plans for Dad's appointment tomorrow." Another lie, but the last one. By this time tomorrow, truth would be the new currency at Crawford Industries, and its rightful guardian was ready to take her place. Morning arrived with crystalline clarity. I'd barely slept, but adrenaline provided all the energy I needed. Bentley had left early for pre-meeting preparations, his kiss on my cheek perfunctory, distracted. He had no idea it was goodbye. I dressed methodically, the charcoal suit with Crawford blue pinstripes, a simple white blouse, my mother's pearl earrings, low heels that wouldn't compromise my mobility or confidence. The woman in the mirror looked both familiar and strange. The girl who had once been Matthew Crawford's heir apparent now matured, tempered by years of silent observation. The Crawford Industries headquarters gleamed in the morning sun as I parked in a visitor spot. This time I didn't approach the front desk or announce myself. George waited by the service entrance, employee badge clipped to his jacket. "Margaret cleared our access," he whispered, ushering me toward the freight elevator. "Security protocols were changed last night, but she has a friend in IT who made sure our credentials still work." We rode silently to the executive floor, emerging into an empty corridor. The boardroom was 3 doors down, the same room where Dad had conducted quarterly meetings for decades, though now redesigned with sleek minimalism that erased its history. Through the glass walls I could see the meeting already in progress. Bentley stood at the head of the table, laser pointer circling figures on a projection screen. Savannah sat near him, taking notes with exaggerated diligence. Board members in expensive suits listened with varying degrees of engagement. Fletcher checking his watch, Timothy Hamilton examining his fingernails with studied indifference. "Ready?" George asked softly. I nodded, clutching Dad's fountain pen like a talisman. We entered without knocking. The pneumatic door hissed open, creating an instant vacuum of silence as heads turned toward the interruption. Bentley froze mid-sentence, laser pointer still illuminating projected revenue forecasts that I now knew to be manipulated. "Ruby." Confusion flickered across his face, quickly replaced by irritation. "We're in the middle of a meeting." "I know exactly what you're in the middle of, Bentley." My voice was steady, authoritative, a tone I hadn't used in 15 years. "And I'm here to stop it." Savannah recovered first. "Mrs. Hamilton, should I call security to escort you out?" Her sugary concern couldn't mask the panic in her eyes as she noticed George standing behind me. "That won't be necessary, Miss Miller." I moved to the center of the room, placing my briefcase on the table. "This is, after all, a family business. And I'm family." Fletcher cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should hear what Ruby has to say." Bentley's smile was strained as he addressed the room. "My wife has been under considerable stress lately. Her father's condition." "My father would be appalled by what you've done to his company," I interrupted, my words landing like stones in still water. "Fortunately, he built safeguards into the very foundation of Crawford Industries. Safeguards I'm invoking today." I removed the original company charter from my briefcase, sliding it toward the center of the table. Article 7, Section 3. In cases of suspected corporate malfeasance, the founder or direct descendants may call for a comprehensive leadership vote with special weighted voting rights for founding shares. Timothy Hamilton leaned forward, poorly concealing his smile. "I believe that requires significant shareholder support." "It does," I agreed. 34% to be precise. I placed a stack of proxy statements beside the charter. "I control 37% as of this morning." Bentley's face drained of color. "That's impossible. You only have 15% through my trust," I finished for him. "Plus George's improperly cancelled options, Margaret's holdings, several retired executives' shares, Fletcher's family investment block, and," I paused for effect, "your brother Timothy's 5%. Timothy raised his coffee cup in mock salute as Bentley's head whipped toward him. "You wouldn't," Bentley hissed. "Already did." Timothy shrugged. "Family loyalty, something you might want to study up on." Savannah shot to her feet. "This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in and—" "Actually she can," Fletcher interrupted, pointing to the charter. "I've reviewed the provision. It's legally binding." The next 30 minutes unfolded with surgical precision. George presented evidence of financial irregularities, including documentation of the shell companies controlled by Bentley and Savannah. Fletcher confirmed that funds had been diverted from employee pension accounts. Timothy revealed that the Anderson merger would have triggered massive executive bonuses while devaluing existing shares. Throughout it all, Bentley's expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally desperate calculation. When the evidence presentation concluded, he attempted one last stand. "This is a witch hunt based on outdated sentimentality," he argued. "Crawford Industries needed modernization to survive. Without my leadership, this company would have collapsed years ago." "Interesting perspective," I replied, opening the final folder from my briefcase. "These are the true financial projections for the last quarter, not the manipulated versions you've presented to the board. The company has been profitable despite your asset stripping, not because of it." The vote was swift and decisive. Using the weighted founders provision, my 37% translated to a controlling interest. Within minutes, Bentley was removed as CEO, pending a full financial investigation. An interim leadership committee was established with Fletcher as chairman and me as acting CEO. Bentley stood frozen as his corporate kingdom collapsed around him. "You planned this all along," he said softly, dangerously. "All those years pretending to be content as a housewife." "No," I corrected him. I trusted you all those years. Until last week when your secretary winked as she spilled coffee on my blouse. Oops. He likes me messy, she giggled, eyeing you like she owned you. Savannah's face flamed as heads turned toward her. That moment crystallized everything wrong with what you'd done to Crawford Industries, I continued. It wasn't just about our marriage. It was about the legacy you were destroying. Security arrived to escort Bentley and Savannah from the building. As they reached the door, I made one final announcement. Miss Miller, you're not fired. The surprise on her face was almost comical. Crawford Industries has always valued loyal employees. You'll be reassigned to facilities management, effective immediately. Margaret will show you where to find the cleaning supplies. After the meeting adjourned, I stood alone in the boardroom, emotions finally catching up to me. The victory felt hollow without Dad witnessing it. My marriage was over. My children would have questions I wasn't sure how to answer. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter. Mom, what's happening? Dad just called sounding weird. Reality crashed down. Corporate coups made for clean narratives in business journals, but messy aftermaths in real life. I'd reclaimed my birthright but lost my partner of 17 years. Right or wrong, necessary or not, there would be collateral damage. I spent the afternoon in meetings with department heads, many of whom regarded me with suspicion born from years of Bentley's leadership. Some were relieved, others resistant. All needed reassurance that Crawford Industries wouldn't undergo yet another traumatic transition. We're not tearing down, I told them. We're remembering. Quality, integrity, family. Those aren't outdated concepts. They're competitive advantages when applied correctly. By evening, the press had gotten wind of the leadership change. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, family, friends, and lawyers. I ignored them all, driving instead to the assisted living facility where Dad waited. The sunset painted his room in amber light as I entered. He was awake, alert, somehow sensing this wasn't a routine visit. I knelt beside his chair, taking his hand in mine. It's done, I said simply. Crawford Industries is ours again. Tears pooled in his good eye. With tremendous effort, he lifted his hand to my cheek in a gesture of both pride and comfort. He understood the cost of today's victory. He'd always understood that true leadership required sacrifice. Worth it? He asked, the two words clear despite his impaired speech. I thought of the company culture that would be restored. The employees who would be treated with dignity again. The business practices that would once more prioritize quality over quick profits. The legacy that would continue for another generation. Yes, I answered, squeezing his hand. Worth everything. As darkness fell outside his window, I described my plans for the company's future. Plans that honored its past while embracing necessary evolution. Dad listened intently, occasionally nodding or squeezing my fingers in approval. Tomorrow would bring complicated conversations with my children, divorce attorneys, and resistant executives. The road ahead contained both restoration and reinvention. But tonight, in the quiet of my father's room, I was simply a daughter who had kept her promise to protect what mattered. The Crawford legacy was safe once more. And I was finally home. If you enjoyed Ruby's journey of reclaiming her family's legacy, please hit subscribe and the notification bell to never miss another story. Drop a comment below sharing what you would have done in her situation. Thanks for reading.